Welcome to the third module from MyThesis Academy. In this module, I would like to go right to the core of the beginning of your thesis. If you had a look on the schedule of our class, then you already know what we will discuss. It is about how do you write your thesis proposal. So in this module, I would like to talk about the tasks, the goals, and also the aims and the limit of such a thesis proposal that is a kind of entrance card to your thesis. I also want to discuss the right scope, because depending to the fact if you write a bachelor thesis, a master thesis, or a Ph.D. thesis, the proposal is also more or less complex and has a different extent. And then we will go over to the question of how to structure a thesis proposal. And last but not least, I would like to do some exercises with you and help you to create yours in 8 easy steps. So let's get it started together. First, let us start with some kind of definition and some information all around your thesis proposal. So what is a thesis proposal? In a nutshell, you can imagine it as a kind of roadmap for your thesis project. So it consists of an explication of your research idea. It contains a draft of the conception, and it is also a kind of showcase for your project. If you have a look at it from the formal point, then it is the entrance card for your admission and a main part of the application, principally for a PhD. But you also have to hand in your proposal to the supervisor and to your thesis committee if you write a bachelor's or a master thesis. What is the goal and what are the aims? What do you have to demonstrate with this proposal? First, the most important, the goal is that you demonstrate your potential as a future researcher. In the case of the post-graduation, of the doctoral dissertation as a doctoral researcher, to your future supervisor and also to the department, or at least to the committee that will decide about your admission, on your admission. So you have to demonstrate that you understand the concept of a thesis, at least if you are a doctoral candidate, then of the PhD thesis. It also has to provide a showcase of your abilities of planning and a showcase of the conception of your project, exposing a complete draft. It is like a kind of mini thesis that you write, but for sure, less the findings. So you have to address and explain everything that you plan to do, but without talking about the findings, because the findings for sure are at the end, when you already have your collected material and the analysis. but not at the moment of a proposal. It also has to outline how do you plan to approach your goals, stating the relevant questions and mentioning the necessary and the important sources and materials where you rely on. Last but not least, it also has to showcase your expertise and the knowledge and also your passion for your field of research. This is in particular in the case of a PhD. So if you think about the second module, there we had a section about your particular strengths. And this is part of this point, this issue, where you have to showcase your expertise and your passion and also the previous knowledge. So keep it in mind. Now I would like to provide you an overview on the task and the limits of a thesis proposal. So before you start to write your conception of this business card of your thesis project, you have to keep very clearly in mind what it is and also the reason why do you write one. First, you have to show some competences to prove your competences, like the ability of critical thinking, especially in the part of the methodology and of the short literature review that you will present in your proposal. You have to transmit a clear idea of your question, of your research gap, question, your focus, your aims and objectives. You also have to showcase the relevant literature in order to indicate the gap of research. But attention, this in the stage of a thesis proposal, it is not necessary that you provide a broad overview on all the literature of the field. It is sufficient if you indicate the most important that also justify why you chose this particular gap of research. And you have to demonstrate your knowledge on the selection of appropriate methods and tools. And you have to show how you will applicate them to solve your research question and succeed a contribution in your field of interest. Last but not least, you have to prove that your research is feasible. This is a very important point. We will also have a look at this when we discuss about the time management. And if you think about the first and the second module, we also talked about limitations of your thesis. And this is something that is important right here, that you prove that you are able to calculate the time and to complete, to draw out a feasible conception. Last but not least, you have also to show a convincing and a clear structure, providing a logical flow through all the thesis proposal from the beginning until the end. So it has to be a conscious conception containing a red thread. But what are the limits and some considerations that we should not forget? First, you have to be aware that a thesis, and in particular a PhD proposal, will not really look like your final thesis, because as your thesis is a kind of work in progress and can suffer from some transformations over the time when you write, you also have to consider your proposal like a draft, and not like a draft, or at least like a guide, but not as a fixed contract. It is possible that when you are going through the process of data collection and of analysis, that the thesis will suffer from some modification that you cannot really know in the moment of writing a thesis proposal. And the same is valid for the question of the time management. It is possible that you spend more or less time on a specific section that you didn't calculate in the same way at the beginning when you wrote your proposal. But even though it is necessary and it is very important that you always keep an eye on the deadlines, after all, on the deadlines for your milestones and for submission, even if you will make some little changes concerning the time management. But the overall conception has to be a firm one. Well, then there are 5 points that I also want you to keep in mind related to the question of transformation or changes that can happen during the process of writing your thesis. It is possible that some new questions emerge and that you have to decide if you will broaden your thesis and your focus, or if you will leave these questions out, because otherwise it will explode the scope and make your thesis infeasible. Then it is also possible that some ideas and imaginations that you had on possible findings may turn out to be false, and that you need to stay open for surprises. And that's why keep everything really flexible. This is in particular something that concerns the fieldwork, so the empirical data collection, and also the analysis. Then, as the thesis proposal gives an overview on what you intend to do, it is also necessary that you make this clear. That is your conception, but that you don't really sell your assumptions or hypotheses as findings. After all, as I mentioned, the thesis proposal is not the right place for any kind of findings or of these kind of assumptions. So, as I mentioned, that is very important to consider the right scope, I would like to present you the approximate scope for a proposal for the 3 thesis types. So the bachelor's proposal, if you write one, there are even departments which doesn't require any kind of bachelor thesis proposal. But if you have to write one, then the scope is around 2 or 3 pages. For the master thesis proposal, you can imagine 4 to 7 pages. And last but not least, for the Ph.D. proposal, it is around 7 to 10 pages. There are even departments requiring more than 10 pages, like up to 15. But this is more or less an exception. The approximate number, the common number of pages is around 10 pages. But this is also up to your university and your department. So before you start to write your thesis proposal and before submitting one, be sure that you fulfill the requirements of your department. Well, now we will go to the next question, which is how do you structure a thesis proposal? Normally it is divided in 7 to 8 sections. Once again, the exact form of your thesis proposal is up to the department, and it is a good advice to look at the page of at the home page of your department, of your faculty, because for sure there are some information informing you about your kind of thesis proposal and also about the scope. And there are even, in many cases, there are some templates, some blank templates providing you with the details and giving you an idea of the sections. And sometimes they also provide the titles that the sections should have. But just let us start with a general one. So the opening consists of a front page and of the table of contents, like the index. Then these 2 issues are followed by a thematical introduction containing the research question, your aims and objectives. And then you continue with the current state of research, providing a kind of short literature review. The 5th section contains a draft of your research design, so of the methods and of the tools that you are planning to apply on your research project to solve your question and to collect your data. And then you have to provide a time and working schedule. This time and working schedule we will also discuss in depth in the 4th module. But I just want to mention that at the end of every thesis proposal, you have to provide one. And then you have the selected references, so an overview on the essential literature that you already included in the thesis proposal or that you are planning to use for the thesis. And as an optional point, you can also put an appendix where you can put some additional material or whatever to illustrate some issues that you mentioned in the thesis proposal. So now is the moment where I would like to give you some detailed information about the 7 or 8 parts and provide you with some information, give you some idea of what they should contain. So if you start to work on your thesis proposal, keep in mind that it is part of the preparation and that a brilliant thesis or dissertation starts with a good and with a careful preparation, because it will make your life a lot easier. So first, you start with the thesis proposal starts with a cover page or a front page. It contains some main information on your university, on your department, and on the faculty. It has to name your supervisors, and it also has to contain some a current working title of your thesis and even a subtitle if you have one. But in my thesis, for example, in the thesis proposal, I also put working title. I added working title to the title that I gave, because, as I said, it is a work in progress, and it is possible that even the title suffers from some transformations. But here you have to keep in mind that there are differences between the universities. Some allow you to provide a working title, and that a title that already or can change. But there are also departments requiring the final title right on the proposal. So keep an eye on that and consult the page of your department or faculty to be absolutely sure what they demand. Then it also should contain some personal information, such as your matriculation number or the number of terms that you already completed, whatever. The date of submission and the location. So it is, last but not least, it is a kind of opening containing all general information. Then you should continue with the table of contents. The table of contents gives a kind of overview on all the sections that you will address and that you will talk about in your thesis proposal, or prospectus, what is also called. So it should contain every title and subtitle of the section, and also the page number that is related. The structure should be as the following. First, the introduction, like a thematical introduction on your topic. Then the research problem and your aims and objectives. This can be put together in one part. Then there should appear the current state of research, and continued by the literature review. But the literature review here is just in a short form, as I said. You also should have a section of the research design, which is the methodology, so the tools and the methods that you will apply to solve your question. And it should contain the time and working plan, as well as a selection of references. If you want, you can also put an appendix with some additional information. But well, this is like a short summary of the sections and of the titles that should appear in your index. Be careful, because some universities provide a specific template where they put the order of the required sections, and some also provide the titles that they want you to write. So let's get to the core of the thesis proposal. The third step would be the short thematical introduction, addressing also your question, your research focus, and the aims and objectives. It gives a kind of contextual introduction, and well, you should locate your specific gap of research, and you also should present a kind of short draft of your concept, presenting a coherent structure and presenting your research question, your thesis statement, the focus of investigation, and address the central aims and objectives. So altogether, it is like a thematical and contextual introduction to your research question and to your thesis project. Then you should provide a section where you talk about the current state of research. So here you provide an overview, you give the reader a kind of idea on the actual state of the literature. It is very necessary that you put the secondary sources and the secondary literature, but you can also talk about sources like additional sources or sources, primary sources, but the main idea is that you provide a brief overview. It is not the idea that you talk in depth about the different concepts and theories and whatever that you will explain in your thesis. It is really a section to give the reader an idea about the actual situation and the present literature which exists on your topic, but it is not the moment to discuss everything in depth. You just should mention the relevant and the essential ones. This is for the literature and also for the sources that you already found and that you like to integrate. The overview on the literature is also a kind of defense for the gap of research, because here you can explain from which perspectives other writers and authors address your topic, and you can highlight the gap in their research. Later, I will show you on the example of my thesis proposal for the PhD what I mean in detail. So I will provide you with a concrete idea and some example. Then, combined with the literature review and the overview on the actual situation and present material for your topic is the research design. As I said, the prospectus or the thesis proposal is a kind of draft. It is a conception. So what you should absolutely consider and integrate is your methodological approach or your research design. In this section, you should name some methods and some tools that you like to apply, well, also some conceptions and theories that you want to pick out and apply on your material to solve your research question. After all, this is also a draft and a conception. So, as I said, it is necessary that you always keep some flexibility, because at this very moment you have a concrete idea which conceptions and which tools and methods can fit to solve your question and to be applied on your data set and your sources and materials. But after all, this is also the a decision that you make at the moment where you imagine how the research can go on and how you will do the research. So your methodological toolkit is something that, yes, you have to provide, but it is also possible that there will be some transformations when you write and work on your data and your thesis. So as the sixth point, you should provide time and a working schedule. This is very crucial because you have to show to the committee, to the examination committee and the thesis committee and to your supervisor that you are able to plan the different episodes of your thesis writing process. So this is also something that we addressed. You have to think very careful about the different episodes that are upcoming, and you have to think about if you want to do field work, for example, or if you how many time you can spend on each section. Well, this is something that we will discuss in depth in the fourth module, where I show you how to create a time and working schedule. But it is necessary that you know that you have to provide one, and also that there are different types and forms of a time and working schedule that can be required. Some universities leave it in your hand which format you will choose to provide the time and working schedule, but there are also some universities which require a specific type, like it should be in form of a running text, or it should be in form of bullet points or whatever. So what you should keep in mind is that this is an essential part of your thesis proposal, and it also proves your ability of time management of the episodes. Well, now there are some points that are still missing. First, the selection of sources and references that you should put at the end of your thesis proposal. So what kind of sources, what kind of literature should appear? For sure, the literature that you already cited or that you mentioned in your literature section of the thesis proposal. For sure, you put some footnotes or some endnotes to indicate the literature that you mention. For example, if you talk about the current state of research and you address some important authors and researchers, or if you talk about the methodological approach and the concepts that you will use to apply and to approach your material and your research question. So everything that you mention here in the text and in the footnotes or endnotes is something that goes into the bibliography. You can also add some cross references, some additional literature. But here, at least, what you also should keep in mind is that it is a selection. So it is not necessary to provide 10 pages or whatever, but yeah, keep it short. Keep in mind that the scope of the thesis proposal should not extend at least 10 or 15 pages in case of the PhD thesis. So the literature and the references that you provide are a selection. And when you start to work on your thesis and to consult the literature, to investigate in depth about the different conceptions and theories and also the context, then you will discuss everything in depth. And yeah, this will be when you start your thesis. And last but not least, we have the additional material that you can provide. This is also something that it is not necessarily required. It is a section that you have to look up at the requirements of your university. Some universities leave it up to you if you want to provide some additional material. For example, you can put some extras, you can put some contact lists, for example, or you can put some ideas of future interview or survey questions, for example. You can also use this part to put some material that you already generated or provide an overview on the existing material if you have some preliminary sources that you already gathered. But this kind is a kind of flexible and free one. What it is important if you put the section and if you add some material in the appendix is that it is some material that should be made to convince the committee from the feasibility and also highlight your qualities as a researcher and your specific qualification to realize your thesis project. This is what you should keep in mind. It is not to put everything, any kind of material that you can imagine, but it should be well selected and for the final aim to convince the committee from your qualities. So now I like to show you some examples of of cover pages, also of thesis proposals. So as the first example, I chose a cover page from the Harvard University in the field of religion. So as you see, you have, overall you have the title prospectus for a dissertation entitled, and here you should put your title, your working title for the dissertation. Then it is followed by to be presented for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the study of religion. And here you put the field of research, so your specific field of research, and the university. In this case, the Harvard University. What also has to appear is some information, some personal information, like your first name, your last name, and some information on the supervisor. If at the moment when you hand in the prospectus, you already have a supervisor, so you should also inform the university of who the supervisor is. And last but not least, it also should contain the month and the year of the submission of your proposal. So this is a blank example, a kind of template of how a cover page of a thesis proposal can look like. Then I have another example, this time from the University of North Carolina. Here I want you to pay attention because this is a blank template, an example from the cover of the dissertation. So in this case, it is to show you how it can look like, how it is designed. But attention, because in this case, you also have to put some information that it is the prospectus, so that it is not the dissertation, but the thesis proposal. But as you see, the information is very similar. So you have the title, in case of the prospectus, the working title. Then you also provide your name. You provide some additional information, like here, thesis or dissertation submitted to the faculty at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And you also put, you put the faculty, you also put the type of your thesis. You have to put the degree and also the program's name or the department and the name of your department, so of the school. Then you have to put also the location. In this case, it is Chapel Hill. And you also provide some information about the supervisors and the thesis committee. But once again, this is an orientation. This is an example of the complete dissertation, so of the final work. If you provide the page for the prospectus, for the thesis proposal, you have to vary and to change some things. Now I would like to show you an example of my own PhD thesis. So first, I like to show you the cover page as the third example, and then I like to go a little bit more into it and show you the different section and give you an idea of the scope of the section that they can have. So this was my the opening, the cover photo, and then I had the cover page. In this case, you see that there's also some information about the university, of the department. So it was the University of Music, Franz Liszt, Weimar. Then some information on the department. So it was the Department of Musicology, the chair on transcultural music studies. And I also added that it is the thesis proposal for a doctoral dissertation submitted in November 2013. I also provided information on my supervisor, and then I continued with, well, a thesis proposal on the doctoral dissertation by Friederike Jurt. Here follows the title, the working title. So in my case, you can see that it was already a complex title. I had a title, a principal title, which had to be a kind of eye-catcher. So I called it Da Idea ao Samba, from the idea to samba. And then the subtitle was more, explained the details of my study and of what I wanted to do. So it was a study on the collective process of composition and the aesthetics of musical creation of samba enredo. It is the samba from the carnival, from Rio de Janeiro's famous carnival, in composers' groups from Rio's famous samba schools, on the example of case studies from Grupo Especial y Grupo A. So as you see, the title and the working title divided in main title and subtitle is already very detailed, but in this case it was still a working title. If I will show you the cover page from the real dissertation at the end, when we reach at the section, then you will see some differences. And last but not least, I also provided some personal details. So I put my name, I put my address, also the phone number and the mail address, like all the contact details. Now is the moment where I like to go deeper into the proposal and to show you how I did it, to give you an impression of how a thesis proposal or prospectus can look like. So this is the title page that you already know, that I explained. And now, as I said, you have the index of the thesis proposal. So as the first point, I put the introduction and the presentation of the research topic, page 3. Then follows the current state of research, the sources and literature, and the theoretical approach. The third point is about, or the third section is about the research design and the approach, in my case, the empirical approach, and also the data collection during the ethnographic fieldwork. The fourth section was an explication about some analytical ideas that I had So I wanted to construct a database of melodical, rhythmic, and harmonic key patterns from samba composition. This is page 5. And then this is a point that you can provide, but this is also up to the university if they require this or not. You can provide a previous organization of the chapters. This is like kind of first draft for the index from your thesis, and the time and working schedule, so the episodes of research and academic writing, followed by the selection of references and the additional material. In my case, a list of contacts, and yeah, if you want, you can also provide some other information like interview questions, as I said, or some first interviews. To give an example, if you already realized an interview, then you can put it as an example. So as you see, here's a thematical introduction. This is like more or less half a page. It can be a little bit more also, but more or less this size is okay. So here I provided some information, some contextual information, and a little introduction on my research topic. And I also finished with some central question of my thesis project. So the context leading to the focus, and followed by some principal research questions. So I started with some general introduction to my topic and to the Carnival from Rio de Janeiro, as you can see, because I wanted to find a smooth way to get the reader inside. So I started like this. The Great Carnival from Rio de Janeiro already became much more than a rushing, extraordinary festival in the Cariocas calendar. The Carioca are the inhabitants from Rio. It became a phenomenon, a kind of event which attracts the international attention and gets focused whether in Brazil as well as all over the world. Numerous articles, documentation on television, and by media such as the internet, all the events and happenings inside the so-called Cidade Maravilhosa, this is another name for Rio de Janeiro, are accompanied, reflected, and commented. My dissertation focuses on the samba enredo, the musical heart of Rio's carnival. This still little studied musical genre of popular music is deeply connected to the city of Rio de Janeiro from the moment of its creation. In 2013, I completed my master thesis, in which I concentrated on the analysis of several musical dimensions, as well as on the question of musical development in terms of continuity and musical modification from the 1980s till 2030, using results from my fieldwork from 2012 to 2013, which was a case study of the Unidos de Vila Isabel. This is one of the most famous summer schools. I'm approaching to the aesthetics of the composition in samba enredo using results and fieldwork material of several case studies of composers' collectives, the so-called parcerias, in various samba schools from Rio. During the fieldwork of the carnival season from 2012 and 2013, I already observed a strong development of musical characteristics in samba enredo and the effect of fete, in connection to a constantly changing society, and how the music of samba, the music of Samajero became a kind of mirror of the social and economic context and of the changing aesthetics and commercial aspects. So you see, you have a short introduction to the context. I'm explaining a little bit about the carnival, about the music, the Samajero, which is the principal music from the carnival. And then I'm leading to my topic, basically. So coming from the moment of the fieldwork for the master thesis, I observed and I found out some stuff and developed some questions. So now you have the collection of the questions, like which are the main pillars, principle, and mechanisms for the construction of a composers collective, and in which way are the tasks distributed between the composers. So who is responsible for what? Which are the external conditions for present pasterias, so for the composers groups, and how do these rules influence the creative process? So I developed some questions all around the process of composition in the samba schools and in the composers groups from the samba schools. Then I went over to the second part, to the current state of research and an overview on the sources and the actual literature, as well as the theoretical approach. As you can see, it is approximately 1 page, and I discussed several issues here. So I started with a kind of overview on the current literature. So I wanted to address the main focus and also leading to the gap of research. I explained the literature, like the relevant works and papers that are addressing the carnival and also the Samajero from different perspectives and points of view. And I also provide some information on the gaps and limitation that they contain. So I started like that. The vast majority of current works about Samajero actually consists in presentations that are dealing with the phenomenon of Rio's summer school in general, with the selected topics, with the enredos of the annual competition in Sapucaí, or with the history of Carnival and Samba, or its significance for the Brazilian society and identity. As you see, I also provide some literature, some footnotes, but in the case of my thesis proposal, I put all the references as endnotes to not disturb in the middle of the lecture. So, in most cases, the studies are focusing on the research of a specific period or a certain samba school, to the music as the central content of research, especially with regard on modifying characteristics or in terms of musical analysis, has been paid little attention until now, probably caused by the lack of written scores and written material, and by the realities and circumstances of this special field. So as you see, I provide an overview, a perspective about the current stage and the literature that addresses my field and my topic. And I also provide some information on the reasons or some hypotheses about the reasons why on the specific topic of composition in Samahedo are so few works, written works. It is, because it is in this case, you have an oral tradition, and so it is very difficult to make some analysis and even to prepare some transcriptions or whatever, some material that you can analyze. In the case of the Carnival, as I mentioned here, so I try to keep it a little bit connected to its context. You have a lot of relevant literature which is written on the history of the Carnival and also on the presentations. So at the desfiles of the summer schools, on the presentation of the summer schools, and on the visual part. But the part of the music and the analysis of the musical characteristics and after all the process of composition is lacking from relevant publications. This is like a little introduction to the state of research. Then I lead over to some more specific information on the things, the relevant works that has been written, particularly on Samahedo and on the musical part. That is the interesting one for me. If there are analytical considerations and musical transcriptions in the present secondary literature, they are mainly partial, so just small passages of scores, but no full scores, and in small numbers. So the scores just like little passages and in a small number, and often concentrate, this is the most important, on a specific historical period. Because I found out that there was written a lot of stuff on the historical episodes, like the decades until the 80s, or until the 80s, until the 90s, whatever. But there's actually no analysis and no specific occupation and relation to the recent decades from the 90s till today. In most cases, however, the analysis focus on the lyrics, so on the written part of the samba lyrics. And I also mentioned some examples. So theses like from Carla Maria Oliveira Viseu or Fabinha Lopes da Cunha are including musical analysis and some investigation on musical characteristics at certain chapters or in certain chapters, but they are concentrating on a specific historical period and leave the question of actual modification and central characteristics, or the question of continuity, out. The creative process of composition itself wasn't investigated and explored at all until this very moment. So here you see the introduction that gives an idea about the gaps and also about the relevant literature of the specific field, but it also explains the limitation. it explains what they do and what they still leave out. Then I go over to a part where I provide an idea and give an impression about what I want to do from the theoretical point of view. Because if I want to talk about samba, if I want to talk about composition and the creative process and everything that is related, one of the first things and one of the most relevant and important things is to pick out the relevant terms, like the key terms for the thesis. In my case, that I'm dealing with a creative process, I first have to provide some definitions definitions from different perspectives for the key terms, and then leading into my own definition that is valid for my thesis and for my work. So first of all, even before analyzing the creative musical process, will be made a presentation of scientific concepts which will be used in my dissertation, as well as the clarification of basic terms, such as composition, performance, creativity, the composer's collective called parceria, and others, and special definition, and their special definition in the context of Samahello. So this is something that you should keep in mind and that you should mention, that you will focus and define some of the key terms that are related to your topic and that the reader need to know in advance and before starting any kind of analysis. Well, so then I mentioned some relevant conceptions that will be used to explore and to define these relevant terms. And I also mention some of these written works, for example, to talk about, to define composition and also different conceptions of composition, but also conception of collective composition. After all, in popular music, there are some studies and some relevant papers and monographs that I wanted to introduce and utilize as a base for myself. Mainly Anja Rosenbrock, composition in groups, in popular music groups and rock. Then there is another that is, for example, from the Encyclopedia, from Helmut Rösing, composition, and Stephen Bloom, composition, or also the conception from Andreas Lehmann, composition and improvisation. So you see, it gives a kind of overview. It addresses the topic and the principle, the core, and the key terms from different perspectives. And then, last but not least, as I'm not just talking about the current, as I'm talking about the current state of research and the sources and literature, it does not just mean the literature, like the secondary literature and the different theoretical approaches and conceptions, but also and addresses also the sources. So here in the second part, I also provide some information on sources that I already collected. For example, in this case, my sources from the fieldwork from 2012 to 13 and 14 to 15, that will also serve as a kind of material. Then there's the third section, which is mainly on the research design and on the empirical approach. So on the question of how I want to realize the fieldwork in Rio, what kind of sources do I want to collect, what kind of data sets I want to record, and yeah. So in this section, I mainly discuss this. So in the primary, in the fieldwork, I like to collect some primary sources, such as documents, for example, handwritten manuscripts, printed documents, then biographies and diaries, also, well, paintings, in case that there are, and I will make some, produce some audio visual material such as photographs and videos, and also audio recordings, like for example during the interviews and in the sessions. And I also I talk about the methods that I will use to achieve this kind of data. For example, things that I already know from the experience of the other fieldwork, that there are the months of the composers competition where I can record in the summer schools, and that I also want to do some fieldwork with realize some interviews with the experts. And here I mention some composers and some experts that I already know and which are already in my network. And finally, I also name the methods, like some interviews that I want to conduct. So this kind of stuff. You see, it continues here, and it is a really kind of presentation of the toolkit, of my methodological toolkit, and also about the data and data sets that I plan to record and document. So then this part is followed by the explication on a specific issue, the construction of a database of melodical and rhythmic and harmonic key patterns that are very common in summer composition these days. And this part is mainly, it is like a second part of the research design, because it explains an analytical approach that I want to take. This is not just about fieldwork and collecting the data and what I do to analyze the data, like how I produce the data and then how I apply my methods to analyze them. But this is also about a kind of additional task that I plan to do with some secondary material. Then I provided part where I collected, where I made a previous organization of the chapters. My real dissertation contains like 5 or 6 pages of index. So you see that this here is really just to give the reader an idea of the different parts and also of the sub-chapters and what would be part of the different sections and chapters. But here, once more, I have to mention that at this point, if you write a previous index or table of contents for the dissertation, then it is a draft. And this is something that yes or yes will transform during the process. Now you have the time and working schedule. So here I noted the different episodes and also the tasks that I want to complete during these episodes. So you see that I put here the different phases and stages. I started with the definition of the start of the beginning of one episode. For example, here you have during the first phase, so until December 2013, then from January to July, then some explication on the field work. So from July to March 2015, and also in summer 2015, followed by the fieldwork episode in October 2015. And then I explained about the last period after the fieldwork, which would be dedicated mainly on the academic writing, on the analysis that I already wanted to start during the collection of the fieldwork material. And then until spring 2017, I wanted to have the essential paperwork ready. Yeah, but as the previous organization of the chapters, the time and working schedule, and the distribution of the episodes is also something that will transform. That is a kind of draft. But here you should absolutely think about the episodes and what do you want to manage and succeed to do. Then I provided a second type of the time and working schedule. As I mentioned, there are different types that we will get to know in the fourth module. And my university required one time and working schedule that should be put into a running text, as you can see here, and also a short one in table form. So here there is no great explication, but it is just a list of the time of the months and the previous tasks. And last but not least, there's also a selection of references, of the main references, after all the references that I mentioned in the section of the current state of research, in the literature review, and also in the introduction and in the part of the research design. So it is like a little collection of the most relevant sources and secondary literature. And as you can see here, I also provided a list of relevant contacts from the network that I already had, and provided this list as a kind of additional material as the annex. So I collected some interview partners, I collected some relevant names from experts from the field of the summer schools and from the carnival. Also the list of the relevant composers and composers who already explained that they will participate in my fieldwork. And I also added a list of musicologists, so of colleagues and experts that would help me and get in dialogue with me in a more scientific way in Rio. And what you see here on the right-hand side, this is the collection of the endnotes. So that is basically what my proposal consists of. This is not a recipe, but this is to give you a concrete idea of the scope of the sections and also what a section can contain in my particular case. And well, if you when you develop your thesis proposal, then you also can take it as a little inspiration and think about your questions and search some some important details that are relevant for your project. Before we finish this section, I would like to give you some little tips that will help you to make your prospectus, your thesis proposal, an outstanding one. So just to sum up all the information and put them together and bring out the core and the relevant ideas, I collected a little list which sums up all the key issues. So what is important and what you should keep in mind when you write your thesis proposal is that you have to be as precise as you can. You have to keep it short and condensed. And you need to press attention on the fact and on the issue of the feasibility. So, for example, in my case, as you know my conception a little bit, my idea and my field of research, if I want to realize a study for a Ph.D. thesis, for example, in the summer schools from Rio de Janeiro, it is crucial that I have some contacts, that I have a knowledge of the field, and that I also can kind of guarantee that I will be able to realize the fieldwork, for example. If I never went to any summer school, if I don't know anybody there, if I don't know the language, it is very complicated. So these are some issues that you should keep in mind and that will help you to make your proposal convincing. Some ideas that I want to give you on your way. Present your ideas in a clear, in a brief, and in a logical way, but try to avoid to get much into detail or also to philosophize about results. This is important because, for example, if you enter in the section of your literature review and you try to explain all of the literature which was ever written on this topic, this is even too much for your thesis, for your final thesis. But in the literature review, in the section of the literature and sources from the proposal, keep it short. Name the most relevant ones and name the gaps. But don't try to explain everything. The same goes for the other sections. Be realistic and keep the plans feasible. This is in particular for the frame and for the scope of your research. Get some feedback and get into dialogue with your fellow students and get some feedback from your supervisor. It is very important that he is also okay with your plan. And keep the sentences clear and conscious. Write them in a readable form. If you introduce some terms, then do this also precisely. And if it is necessary, if you use some terms which are not really from the common language, try to define them, but just define them if they are necessary for the understanding of the reader. Otherwise, leave this for the dissertation and just mention the key terms, like in my case, composition, creative process, improvisation, performance, whatever, and give some previous information that you will discuss the conceptions of these terms from different perspectives, leading into the one which is relevant and which is valid for your thesis. And last but not least, if you decide to create some additional material, then highlight your strengths, highlight the concepts, highlight the contexts that you have, maybe provide some detailed interview that gives an idea about what and how you are going to do the things, because as concreter the idea is that you transmit, the better it is. And for the title, you already saw that my working title, for example, is already detailed. So I tried to select some kind of eye-catcher, in my case, from the idea to Samba. And then in the subtitle, I tried to be more specific in terms of what exactly the study is dealing with. And I tried to name some participants, and I tried to put what the study is on, and also put on the example of case study groups from this and this summer schools, for example. So try to take this list as a kind of orientation. If you want, you even can print it out. You can download and print it out and put it somewhere and make sure that you pay attention on these points and double check if you are really completing this point. Last but not least, now it is your turn. So I prepared a little template for you for the 8 sections. So on this template, you have the section 1 to 4, the front page, the cover page, then the index, then your introduction and the current state of research. And on the second part, you can see the research design, so the method and methodology, the time and working schedule, and your references and the annex. And now I would like you to do a little exercise and download these 2 templates and fill it with your ideas. So try to note all the information that you already have or that you that you are generating, and fill it, get a pen and the template, and try to fill the windows out with your ideas. This serves you as a base for your real thesis proposal. So now we are reaching the end of this 3rd module. I hope that you have an idea of everything that is around the thesis proposal. And before we come to the end of this class, I just would like to recapitulate what you took from this class. So this class was all around the prospectus. We discussed what it is and also what it consists of. Then I explained the tasks of a thesis proposal and also the limitations. We paid attention to the question of how to choose the right scope for thesis proposal for the different thesis types. And then we got deeply into the structure of a thesis proposal, followed by the explication of the 8 steps that you have to take when you create yours. I also provided some examples, like some templates from universities, and I showed you on the example of my own thesis proposal how you can structure a prospectus and what goes into the different parts on the concrete example of my project. And before leaving you with the exercise of collecting some first ideas for your proposal, I also explained and created a list for you which sums up all the relevant points that you should consider in the moment when you create your proposal. So I hope that you enjoyed the class and that you already have some ideas of how to fill out the different fields in your template. And if you have this exercise ready, then try to put the ideas onto a document that, on the computer, and let them inspire you to develop more or to add more details, but you already have the first base to create your prospectus. See you in the 4th module.